My name is Glenn Fishbein. I'm with GEO Partners, and I'm one of the people who's working with the group that is working on improving the quality of broadband services throughout the Cumberland County and surrounding region. We've been doing studies like this for the last 3 years. We've done about 270 studies, and what we're doing is we're trying to bring our best practices into line with what the community needs are going forward. We have a pretty standard process for doing this. The first step is to get a sense for what is happening today on the ground in the area. And for that purpose, one of the things that we worked on with the state of Maine and some of the nonprofit organizations, economic development districts in the Maine, was the ability to bring forth a crowdsourcing program throughout the entire state. That program generated a large amount of data that shows how home internet services are performing throughout the region and is down to essentially the rooftop level in many cases. This is an example of that type of mapping showing Cumberland County and surrounding areas. The color coding is indicative of the quality of the service that the individuals have at their particular locations. Where you see a green dot, that is a high quality service. Where you see a red or yellow dot, that's lower quality service. And where you see a black dot, that's no service. So we can start seeing pretty early in the process as we move into these areas. For example, near Naples, we have clusters of good quality service that we can identify and clusters of low quality service that are also showing up. So this allows us to have a sense for how the people who live in these areas are responding to the types of internet services that are available and how those services may be needing to be improved. The map that I'm showing you right now is color-coded in terms of the federal standards for quality broadband services. So, for example, in this particular display, we're showing services that are considered low quality as anything less than 25 megabits per second. The state of Maine is adopting a higher standard requirement than the federal government standard, and we'll be moving that to 100 megabits per second download speeds as a baseline for the standard. So what you're seeing here is reflective of the federal standards, but if we look, for example, at some of these green dots, by federal standards, that is a good quality service, but by the state of Maine new standards, that's a 49 megabit download. That would be a substandard performance for that particular location. So what we can basically see is that by the federal standards, there are pockets of low quality service, and by the Maine standards, we'll be adjusting this map in the near term to reflect much broader swaths of people that are currently not having the services that the state of Maine is going to be servicing their citizens in the future. The nature of the testing that we do is essentially to the rooftop level. We keep that information very, very strict under the belt so that we don't invade people's privacy regarding their locations, but that also permits us to take a look at some of the routing that may occur as we perform broadband studies to figure out how to get better quality services to those individual households or clusters of communities. Looking at Cumberland County overall, we have a way of summarizing the quality of services within the area. This is a single sheet display that we can pass out to various community members to get a sense for the overall characteristics of broadband within the county. We see the household count at about 138,000. We've had within the county 2.5% participation, meaning that we've had a lot of people taking these tests. We've had over 4,600 tests taken within the county at 3,500 unique locations. Some individuals take the test more than one time. And then we can take a summary as to what quality of services there are overall throughout the county, including individuals who do not have services. We also can see the prominent ISPs in the region, Charter Communication being the dominant provider, followed by Fairpoint and some Comcast. In terms of the services that we actually see, in terms of the quality of service, we're looking at something on the order of about 45% of the population households are getting less than the FCC minimum of 25 megabits per second. And we'll be modifying this. We'll see something on the order of more than half the households don't meet the current Maine standards within this area. This type of information can also be overlaid with information regarding where available infrastructure services are. We have several ways of looking at available infrastructure. One way is to identify the possibility of where fiber may be within these communities and in these service areas. So what I'm doing right now is I'm bringing up what we think is available fiber based upon reporting of information to the FCC within this county. And what this is going to do is this is outlining census blocks where we have reports of existing fiber infrastructure. So for example, as we move into this area here, for this particular census block, we have a report that Charter Communications has both a retail and a commercial fiber service at 100 megabits per second. This information is reported on a census block by census block basis, and it gives a good indication as to what types of services are available to these individuals that are already in the ground as reported to the FCC. It does not always reflect what is actually present. Oftentimes, this information is not reported to the FCC, and there are other ways we can go about looking at this. So some of the things that we can do from this type of data, we can also take a look at how this information compares with various other layers of information that are available to the community. So we can take an outline of a particular area and extract additional detail about the information content of that area. So for example, what we can basically see right now is that same area, the same speed test content. And now what we're also showing is some of the critical infrastructure that is available in these areas. The critical infrastructure is important in that it needs to be supported by good quality broadband services, and it's also a necessity for getting a grant approval in many cases. So for example, with this type of information, we can find, for example, the emergency services that are in the area, such as the West Bridgeton Fire Department, some of the schools that are in the area, such as Birthwise Midwifery School, and some of the medical facilities that are in the area, such as the Brighton Healthcare Center. A combination of all these services within the area permit us to have a sense for what type of infrastructure is present and how we have to support that infrastructure as well. Additionally, what we can also see from this type of information is some of the previous funding that has occurred in the area. We can see, for example, these blue dots represent locations where other companies have received federal dollars to improve qualities of services and the programs that occurred that granted those dollars to the community. And we can also take a look at a census block level on a block by block basis of the services that the FCC 477 data says is present. The 477 data is a collection of data collected by the FCC, reported by the providers on a census block level, which essentially tells the FCC where providers believe they have offered services, these services being the maximum available downloads and upload speeds for those areas. Using that same information, we could also take a look at some of the service territories of the various providers in the region and determine whether or not these providers may be potentially good allies for expanding services within the area. And in some cases, they may be very, very prevalent and helpful, and in some cases, they may just barely be in the territory and be focused on other areas. But this helps us take a look in terms of the type of community support that we can get in terms of private-public partnerships. Since the community itself will probably never become an ISP, we need to find ISPs that are willing to work with the community, and this guides us as to which partners we can be looking for to expand the quality of services in a region. We have zoomed into a portion of this area to illustrate some of the detail and granularity of the information that we have. These little blue outlines that you see represent census blocks that are used at most of the granular levels of analysis for broadband. One of the interesting things that you can start seeing from this type of analysis is we're immediately getting information about the potential costs of, say, a fiber or cable deployment into the area. If you look up here into this section right up here, for the entire region, we see the population, the household count, the total number of road miles that are in this area, which represents also the total numbers of miles of fiber we would have to run. But we also see that information at the census block level too. this number representing the census block, this number telling us how many households we have in that area, and how many miles or feet of road that we would have to traverse. So if you watch these numbers here while I move my mouse over various census block, you'll see that, for example, there we have 42 households in that area. There's 24,000 feet of road or fiber that has to go into that area. And this information is available on each census block level. So this will help us ultimately figure out how we're going to be able to cost out a hypothetical project into this area. Some of the other information that we have here also includes something called RDOF. RDOF is a FCC program that went out for auction last year. And this is an effort to get at the census block level companies to invest resources into providing services into these areas. And we can see these as the pea soup green. These are in fact RDOF census blocks. And the FCC is going to be paying, according to this information, SpaceX Technologies to deploy their services into these census blocks, servicing, for example, in that case, 12 households. There are a number of other things that we can take a look at as we go through these types of maps, but the key objective we're trying to get to here is sensing where the areas are and how much it's going to be costing to provide services to those areas. At a very basic level, as we move back to the, say, originating map, we can literally outline an area for a hypothetical project, and we can start determining how much it would cost to put a particular kind of deployment into the area. And that's one of the major functions of what we're doing on this entire project throughout the entire Cumberland area region. But by example, we've selected this as a small portion of the area, and we're going to show you some of the cost constraints that go into doing a deployment. So what we have here is we have to know some basic information about the area and some of the costs that are corresponding with the area. And then we can hypothetically drive this to be a fiber to the home deployment using certain types of technology that we have. And with that type of information that we can verify from the providers that are currently in the area, we can now come up with the cost estimate for providing fiber to the 235 households that were in that area that we were just looking at. And from that, then the system can automatically calculate how much electronics is required and how many miles of fiber are required. And it will give us a basic summary model that shows us that our costing for that region, if we were to do a fiber to the home deployment, that there's no pre-existing infrastructure, is going to cost us on the order of $1.3 million. Now, sometimes people go into sticker shock on that, but what we're looking at is a cost per household in scenarios like that of perhaps $5,500. Since it's not uncommon for a fiber to the home project to cost as high as $15,000 per household, this is well within the range of what we would think of as a normal fiber implementation project. But keeping in mind the entire region as a whole, when we're looking at all the possible cost structures that go in there, we are generally going to be looking at some sort of compromise solution that's going to be affordable, one that includes both fixed wireless solutions and fiber solutions to bring the most quality service we can to the community without breaking the bank.